Shoes. Let's talk about shoes. These shoes rule. These shoes suck. So there is no
Ultra
bad
loves that.
I do love my Ultras.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's get a little bit more clarity on that for a second.
Yeah. Well, the millennials will know. To start off, there is no bad shoe.
No bad shoe or company.
There's
Fourth
no
wall.
bad shoe or company.
No bad shoe.
I truly love my Ultras.
Yeah.
No bad shoe company. What we are really talking about is when is a shoe inappropriate for either your anatomy, your symptoms, or your activity.
Characteristics of the shoe.
Characteristics of the shoe.
Like the tire of your car. You would not drive a summer tire in the Arctic tundra, nor would you wear studded. They don't even make studded tires anymore, but
you don't have chains on your.
You're not rolling in that in like Nevada, just because you just don't do that. Shoes are the same way. Again, there's no bad shoe, but I think what we're finding is where clients get mistaken is, for example, you're not going to get the most efficient lifting with a running shoe because of some of the properties on a running shoe. Well, in reality, you kind of don't want a shoe that's got a massive amount of thickness and foam between you and the ground, because that's going to compromise integrity of response between you and the ground. It's more or less like you're standing on a pillow. So try to squat with your feet onto AirX pads. You kind of can't do that. So you kind of want a lower profile. You want a rigid platform. You want intimacy with the ground. You don't want to be on a big foam cushion.
It'll actually rob you of force that you could generate as you try to squat, deadlift, snatch, clean and jerk, anything like that.
Yeah.
Physics.
Yeah. So if you're in any kind of fitness setting where there is lifting involved, and I would argue that's heavier load lifting, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, even your HIIT classes that have lifting as the component, maybe that's the priority of that camp or that course that day, you might have more than one shoe for that medium because there's a more optimal shoe for what that class was providing versus, say, the class that's coming the next day. So
as far as even running shoes then, so we're talking, strength, mixed modalities versus running shoe, walking shoe. When we're talking about weight training, strength training, powerlifting, right? Even real competitors will have these really stiff shoes to help them feel the ground, to help them punch down into the ground with, better physics. When we're talking about a running shoe, and even, this is also true in the weightlifting shoes, but we're talking about running shoes, the difference of cushion, stabilizers, neutralizers, the different drop angles, how are we advising, negotiating per person, per terrain, etc.?
Yeah, again, no, there's no bad running shoe. I think I would go on everyone's their own system. I'm a big proponent of trying a bunch of shoes on because I think there is an art of the fit as much as there is a perfect brand for a person. I love going to a store and having them bring out 10 pairs and then you trying them all of them on collectively just to really get a feel. So I do think there's like a subjective art to finding the right shoe. I think as far as some of the like nuts and bolts of a shoe, drop angle or millimeter drop is a big thing. I think probably the thing that's more anatomically relevant is whether you know this or not, but if you have good ankle flexibility, whether that's because of ankle joint flexibility or soft tissue tightness, like a calf that's tight, for example, that individual may or may not benefit from a shoe that has a variable drop, because if the shoe is very low to the surface, like a 0 to a 4, there's no forgiveness there for that person's ankle mobility, as opposed to if that's a 10 millimeter and above drop angle, there's going to be forgiveness there. Now, I will argue there's also, this is where this gets super in the weeds, because there's proponents of people who would argue that the drop shoes were like causing these problems because of the way they were making people strike on their foot. Like, you can really go nuts with this stuff. But I think at the end of the day, 0 drop shoes are fine. Drops are fine. It's kind of what are you going to use the shoe for? How much mileage are you going to use with that shoe? Or is it going to be short runs, long runs? What's going to feel comfortable? That's all going to matter as much as can you adapt yourself down to a lower drop? You can over time. That definitely can help if you want to go there. There's nothing that says you can't do that. But I will say from personal experience, going into something that doesn't really exist on the market anymore and think you can run like a 5K on it and not feel yourself for the next 3 or 4 days and stuff because it forced, yeah, that's going to happen. So yeah, Cody, you're a big runner.
By big runner, you mean I was forced to run a 5K
Yes,
over.
exactly.
Yes.
Any other insights on running shoes?
I will say, and this does point towards maybe some of my capacity as a runner versus the how much can footwear help. A shoe is not going to magically fix your capacity. The shoe should complement efforts that you are taking to improve your capacity, or fill in maybe some of the gaps that you might not possess. I start to think of heel, like arch support, things like that. You know, how much does somebody need arch support compared to something else? For me, you could give me all or as little arch support as you want, but you tell me to go run a 5K, which I definitely maybe kind of didn't train for. It's not going to feel great regardless of what goes on at the foot. So
yeah, no, I will also, to be remiss, because I know this is out there in the ether. I think shoe fads create extremes, and the funny irony of it is if everything just falls back to the middle, you kind of start to see what sticks versus like what comes and then kind of goes away. So the shoes that literally had no padding, you don't see a ton of those anymore on the market. On the flip side, the shoes with the massive amount of foam, I would argue maybe are a little bit more popular the last handful of years, but there's even some pushback in our research on, not ours, but our profession's research on, is it actually too much padding? Because again, it goes back to like you're running on a cushion, so you're losing some of that to the floor kind of intimacy. So at the end of the day, it's almost like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Like it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too hard, it's too soft. What works the best? We kind of start falling back into the middle. And I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day, that's what still always ends up shining through is once the fads fade away, it's those kind of mid-range shoes with maybe not maybe it's not a full 0, but maybe it's not a 12, maybe it's not as massive midsole, but it's also not nothing. All this matters because I think that's, it's a little bit of a happy medium both ways. Too much of a good thing never works in almost anything, especially shoes.